Hi, welcome to the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan presentation for the District of Hudson's Hope. My name is Mitch Wilson. I'm a registered professional forester with Mammoth Forestry, and I've been working with the district on this plan. So a couple quick icebreakers. First question is, who likes fire? I like fire. I think that we've had some bad wildfire seasons and we're all a little traumatized from that. And this question is just to get us thinking about our relationship with fire. I use fire this first picture shows some land clearing for a building site, and fire's great for managing debris. Uh, the next picture is a resource management burn with Parks Canada. So ecosystem managers are using fire here to manage the ecosystem. Uh, I use fire to heat my home. The list goes on, and I think when we ask who likes fire, um, all humans, it's in us. Uh, we like fire. It's how we cook. It's how we heat our homes and things like that. So I don't think fire is neither good or bad. I just think it is, and this understanding that if we're in an ecosystem that typically burns every 100 years, if our home is in that ecosystem, we need to be ready for that because that's part of the natural cycle, and we kind of got to be in tune with that. So the next question is, what is resiliency? And so resiliency is the capacity to uh, recover or withstand difficulties. And in the case of wildfire resiliency, it's the capacity to withstand or recover from a wildfire. And I've got this old album cover. It's a Supertramp album, Crisis What Crisis. You see a guy sitting in a lawn chair. He's quite relaxed while the world appears to be crumbling around him. I like this metaphor because if you can prepare your community, if you can prepare your home for wildfire, if you manage the fuels around your home, when the next fire comes along, you'll be sitting in a lawn chair like this guy. Not recommending that. You sit in a lawn chair and watch a fire, but metaphorically speaking, you'll be sitting in a lawn chair, kind of relaxed, because um, you're resilient now. You prepared. And so that's really what this is all about. So if you see this lawn chair guy, he symbolizes resiliency. So what is a Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan, or CWRP? It's a strategic document that we use to assess our community's wildfire risk and then develop a plan to mitigate that risk. It's all done within the FireSmart BC framework. Well, what's FireSmart BC? It's a provincial program aimed at reducing the negative losses to wildfires in BC. It's targeted towards local government and homeowners, and it basically works by engaging and empowering residents and communities to protect their homes and communities. So the program has resources like assessments, information. It's basically a framework or structure that guides communities and homeowners to mitigate their local risk. It's managed by the BC FireSmart Committee, which is a group of provincial ministries, local governments, First Nation Emergency Services Societies, etc. A bunch of organizations that are concerned with wildfire mitigation and resiliency. And so who's funding this program? The BC government is through its Community Resiliency Investment Program. And this program has two streams. There's the Crown Land stream. So you have the Ministry of Forests who's looking at the wildfire risk on land adjacent to communities on Crown land. And then you also have this FireSmart Community Funding and Support Stream, which is administered by the Union of BC Municipalities, UBCM, and BCWS acts as a technical advisor to them. Who's managing the program on the ground? Local governments are. And so the District of Hudson's Hope is managing this particular program. So it's a little complicated, but it's provincial government funding going to UBCM, who's administering it with support, technical support from BCWS, and on the ground, it's the District of Hudson's Hope managing the program. So what's in this plan? What's in the plan? Well, first we look at what work has already been done. So what are the existing plans, bylaws, policies, and wildfire resiliency progress that we have to date? So where are we at today so we can make a plan moving forward? Now, what are the values that are important to protect? Obviously, it's important to protect homes, um, but we also think about things like emergency response infrastructure. That's going to be pretty important to protect it as well. So what are our values at risk? The next question is, what's the risk of wildfire to the community? And so we do a wildfire risk assessment to figure out what's the specific risk. And by understanding this risk, we can make a plan to mitigate or to manage this risk. And so that's the next part is a mitigation plan. So what what steps are we going to take to manage that risk that we identified? And then concretely, we get into an action plan that outlines who's going to do this work, when are they going to do it, what resources do they need. A quick introduction to Hudson's Hope, which I don't think a town that needs no introduction, as it is the playground for the peace. And if you watch this video, you've probably been, or hopefully been out to Hudson's Hope, been hiking, fishing, boating, lots of fun things to do out there. And yeah, it really is the playground of the peace. There's about 840 residents. The population is declining a little bit, but pretty steady. Um, Interestingly, 30% of provincial energy production, so a very significant contributor to provincial energy. Um, so you have the two hydroelectric dams. You've got the Bennett Dam and the Peace Canyon Dam. And you have other industries in Hudson's Hope. You've got oil and gas, farming, forestry, and tourism. You've got the Hudson's Hope Fire and Rescue Service, which is a volunteer fire department with 26 members, and you have a full-time chief and deputy chief. There's a fire station at the downtown at the district office, and there's one out at Barrel Prairie as well. So I like to say that Hudson's Hope was fire smart before it was cool. Because if we go back to 2009 and 2013, to 2013, we see that there's a number of policies and bylaws that actually support wildfire resiliency. So in 2013, the official community plan, the OCP, it has a number of policies in it that prioritize wildfire resiliency. You have the Fire Protection and Life Safety Bylaw in 2009, which prohibits the accumulation of combustibles around homes. You have the 2010 Property Maintenance Bylaw, which prohibits the accumulation of rubbish around homes. So you have a number of bylaws that are restricting the accumulation of combustible material around homes. They don't use the word fire smart, but that's basically what these bylaws are. And yeah, so you have this sort of legislative base for wildfire resiliency already established in the community, which is great. And then from 2011 to 2017, you have 185 hectares, which is quite substantial, of fuel treatments that were completed around the community. In the Lynx Creek area, Jameson Woods, Barrel Prairie. So quite a lot of fuel treatment work was done. So this really shows how the community recognized early on the importance of wildfire resiliency, which is great. In 2014, you had the Mount McAllister fire, and then you also had the Battleship Mountain wildfire in 2022. I put these on the timeline just to kind of show how, the progression towards wildfire resiliency. You do get these events that kind of act as wake-up calls along, as we try to push forward to have a more resilient community. We are uh, often kind of reminded and tested of the importance of this work. So from 2021 to 2022, you had the the fire department with Chief Brad Milton, I believe, did a Fire Smart Economic Recovery Fund program. And this program was focused mostly on education, general awareness of fire smart principles within the community. And then most recently, which this presentation is a part of this program, in 2005, you have what is basically year one of a Fire Smart Community Funding and Support Program. And part of this program is the development of the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan and this presentation. And the idea is that we're picking up where we left off and we're moving towards wildfire resiliency. And this plan is going to lay that out. What values are important to protect? Well, first and foremost, we want to protect our emergency response infrastructure. And that's shown here on the left with these red triangles. So examples would be the radio repeater on Mount Bullhead. We want to make sure that's not compromised if there's a wildfire, so our crews can keep talking to each other. The fire halls, for example, we don't want those to be impacted by wildfire. We want our crews to be able to continue working. So we're kind of thinking of our community as a bit of like a beehive or an ant colony where we're really protecting our ability to protect ourselves first, if that makes sense. And then we also want to protect homes. And so we use this concept called the wildland-urban interface, which is shown here on the right in red. So you have the District of Hudson's Hope outlined here in black. And then in red, you have a zone called the Wildland-Urban Interface, or WUI. And this is basically the zone where structures and human development meet or intermix with wildland areas. So it's defined as a 1 kilometer buffer around areas with a structural density of 6 or more per square kilometer. So basically, these are the areas where most of our buildings are, where most of our homes are. So we focus on protecting most of the homes, and we still want to protect, we still want to give resources and work with residents that are beyond these areas. But when we're doing work like fuel management and trying to protect neighborhoods, we really focus on where the homes, where there's the highest density of homes, so that we have the biggest impact and we protect the most homes with our work. So for the wildfire risk assessment, we ask ourselves 3 questions. The first question is, how likely is a wildfire? And to answer this question, we look at the fire history and the natural fire regime and how climate change might be affecting those patterns and cycles. So the past is the best predictor of the future. If we look and see how frequent we've been having wildfires in the area, how they're caused, things like that, that's going to tell us what we can expect for the future. The next question is, what type of wildfire can we expect? And so we're going to look at the weather and climate, the local topography, and the fuels, the wildland fuels that are around the community, and that should tell us what type of fire, so fire behavior we can anticipate. Are we going to get a big wall of flames or just a smoldering fire on the ground, for example? And our last question is, what would be the impact of a wildfire? And this really has to do with what type of fire are we going to get, but how close is that type of fire going to be to our values? And what are the pathways for that fire to move to our values? And what vulnerabilities are present on our values that will give us an indication of the potential impact of future wildfire. So to have a fire, we need 3 elements. We need fuel, oxygen, and heat. Now, when we're talking about a wildfire, there's not much we can do about the heat because that's dictated by the weather. The oxygen, typically not much we can we can do there either because that is just the atmosphere. But fuel is something that we can manage in the fire triangle. When we look on the right side, we have the fire behavior triangle, which is more appropriate for wildfire. And in this triangle, we have fuel, topography, and weather as the three elements that influence fire behavior. Again, there's not much we can do about topography. There's not much we can do about the weather except complain. But there is something we can do about the fuel. So when we look at really what's dictating how a fire behaves, there are certain elements which are just part of the environment, such as heat, oxygen, topography, weather. They just are what they are. The only aspect that we can actually affect or manage is the fuel side of these triangles. So the first element contributing to fire behavior that we'll look at is topography. And Hudson's Hope is situated in a transition from the eastern slopes, the eastern foothills of the Rocky Mountains, out to the Boreal Plains. And now when we look at this, this is a terrain map of the area around Hudson's Hope. We see this is the Peace Reach here on Williston Lake. And it's kind of like an opening in the mountains. So you're getting wind funneling, I believe, through this opening. And that's why your prevailing wind direction is primarily a westerly. This is the initial spread index rose for Hudson's Hope. So it's showing that most of the time your winds are coming from the west, a little bit from the southwest, but mostly from the west. And I believe that, yeah, the topography is influencing that a bit. Um, what else do we see? So we have the Williston Lake, we have Dinosaur Lake here in the Peace Canyon, and we have the Site C Reservoir here. So you have three major water bodies that are in a way providing some natural protection for the community. The town site of Hudson's Hope is located around here. And the nice thing is that below the town, you have water, which is great because fire likes to run quickly uphill. It's nice that you don't have any hazardous fuel types below the community. So there's not a real risk of an ignition below town and running uphill into town. So that's great. Um, Now, what else do we see when we're talking about topography? Well, we see a lot of south-facing slopes around the community, and it's interesting to note, yeah, how aspect affects fire behavior. So here we have a diagram showing a little bit about that. Basically, on south-facing slopes, um, they're more exposed to solar radiation, they dry out quicker, they're warmer, and so you get more frequent fires on south-facing slopes because it is typically hotter and drier. And because you have more frequent fires on these slopes, you have less fuel accumulation, so the fires are typically less intense. If you look at the north-facing aspect, they're typically more moisture, that's more shaded. And so they don't burn as frequently, and there's a lot more fuel on these north aspects. So they don't burn frequently, but if they do, if a fire does get into in the right conditions, there's a lot of fuel, and you can have um, usually, yeah, you can have a more intense fire, but less frequent, basically on a north-facing slope. So these are, yeah, these are the main ways when we look at Hudson's Hope that topography interacts with fire behavior. But just to summarize, it's really you are getting some natural protection as these waterways will break up. They kind of act like a natural fuel break. Now, fire can spot, a kilometer in high wind environments, so it's not an absolute protection, but it's better than having continuous fuel right up to your community. So the next element we'll look at is climate and weather. So this is climate data for Hudson's Hope. In the bottom with these blue bars, you see precipitation throughout the year. We'll just note that we typically have lower levels of precipitation in the spring, and then we have what I like to call, or what we like to call the June monsoon, midsummer. So quite a bit more, peak moisture in June and July, and then things dry out a little bit more in late summer and fall. And we have the temperatures ramp up, and I'll show you now with the next slide that we have peak wildfire activity in the month of May. Typically, or on average, 50% of wildfires occur during the month of May in the Hudson Soap area. And this is because we have low levels of precipitation in the spring and increasing temperatures of spring. Typically, we have a dip in wildfire activity during June and July when we're getting lots of precipitation. And then from August, September, October, we sometimes see a resurgence of fire activity as our temperatures are still high and precipitation starts to fall. Now, how is climate change affecting these patterns? Well, if you look on the top graph here, we have the mean yearly temperature, and we're seeing that it is increasing over time. We've increased 1 degree, just over 1 degree since 1979 as a mean annual temperature. And then when we look at the bottom graph, that's the mean annual precipitation, and that's going down. And so that's decreased by 35 millimeters anyway. So essentially these trends are showing that Hudson's Hope is getting hotter and drier. And so hotter, drier conditions, we would expect more frequent and initially more severe wildfires. And the next element is fuel. This is the most important because this is one of the only element that we can actually control. And so when we talk about fuel for wildfire, we're talking about vegetation or forest types or forest fuel types, actually. And so these are the five main forest fuel types that we see around Hudson's Hope. Now, I'm not going to dive into too much detail. Um, I think what's important to know is really the threat associated with these fuel types is related to how much conifer or evergreen. So do you have, spruce and pine trees? Because that's typically represents a higher threat than, say, deciduous trees, like your um, broadleaf trees like aspen, for example. So these pictures were taken, except for this one, these were taken during our wildfire threat assessments around the community. And these are, yeah, the main fuel types we found. Just keeping it high level, the boreal spruce, so this dense spruce forest it represents quite an extreme risk. This is the most extreme fuel type in Canada. You have dense spruce trees, you've got lots of ladder fuels. So you typically get what's called a continuous crown fire. So if you're thinking big wall of flames, that's this fuel type. Um, Okay. The next would be this lodgepole pine, mature lodgepole pine. So not as intense as the boreal spruce because you can see there's a lot more space between the fuels. You have space between the different layers of fuels. So you have like, anyway, you have surface fuels and you've got canopy fuels. Um, but yeah, just trying to keep it sort of high level. Um, if we look at, so these conifer fuel types are typically, well, especially this boreal spruce is your highest, most extreme threat. Um, Lodgepole pine is your high moderate threat. So you're going to get like a surface fire with intermittent crown fire under 90th. Yeah, anyway, intermittent crown fire. So basically, you'll have a fire that's on the ground, it'll go up, burn in the treetops, it'll come back to the ground, and so on. When you look at a boreal mixed wood, so this is a mixture of typically it's spruce and aspen we see around Hudson's Hope. Basically, the threat associated with this forest depends on the proportion of conifer or spruce. So more spruce, more threat, more aspen, less threat. And so this fuel type typically represents sort of like a moderate uh, threat. Aspen is lower threat because, well, we look at an aspen forest, we see big wet logs. That's what I see. Um, a lot of space between fuels. So this is if you've been in an aspen forest in the middle of summer, it's actually a humid, moist, cool environment. So not really conducive to extreme fire behavior. You're just going to get a fire that burns along the ground, not as big of a deal when you compare it to these other fuel types. Similar with a grass fuel type, what do yes, we've got some conifer trees here, but it's mostly grass. And so if a fire comes through this fuel type, you're mostly going to have just a surface fire, which is quite a bit less intense. So basically, just to summarize and keep it kind of high level, this fuel type represents extreme threat. This is sort of a high to moderate threat. Um, these are lower threat fuel types. Okay, with that very broad overview of fuel types, let's see what we have in the Hudson's Hope WUI. Here we see that we have 30% grass or farmland, 37% grass or farmland, 40% deciduous forest. So already we're looking at almost 80% low threat fuel types, which is great news. We have mixed wood at 15%. And then when we look at the conifer leading fuel types, so these are your higher threat fuel types, there's not a lot. We only have 4% of that extremely volatile fuel type of the C2. So altogether, this is great news. The majority of your forest fuel types are what I would consider low threat. Okay, pop quiz. What percent of fires around Hudson's Hope are human caused? Would you say most fires are caused by lightning? That's A. It's about half, 50-50. Do you think most are human caused? Maybe 75%? Or do you think almost all of the wildfires around Hudson's Hope are human caused? So let's say 9 out of 10 fires are human caused. You guessed it, human caused. So we did an analysis where we looked at all the historic wildfires within 50 kilometers of the WUI, and we ran statistics on that to find out that yes, 91% of wildfires in the Hudson's Hope area are human caused. And that is why there's a picture of Smokey the Bear with a shovel about to try and address the issue. Um, I think it's good information, and it helps to play into our strategy for mitigating this issue. Here's a map of historic wildfire perimeters around Hudson's Hope. Red indicates human-caused fires. Yellow indicates lightning-caused fires. Now we see in our analysis, when we look at fires within 50 kilometers, there were 660 wildfires and 450,000 hectares burned. So a lot of fire on the landscape and primarily human-caused fire when we're looking around Hudson's Hope. When we look at the area burnt, the graph on the left, we do see that the graph on the previous slide was the number of fires. This is the area burnt. And so we do see that lightning caused fires do represent a significant amount of area, although they are less in number. So that's interesting. That just indicates that when you do get a lightning caused fire, they typically grow. And I believe that's because the conditions conducive to ignition by lightning are also conducive to fire growth. Um, So yeah, but the big take home is look at that fire in the landscape and look at what the primary cause has been. So when are these fires occurring? Well, we're seeing most of the fires. Now, I like to use area burned because that's really measuring the impact on the landscape, which is also, in a way, an indicator to potential impact to structures and values. And so we see lots of area burnt here in the spring, lots in May. We see that dip typically from the June monsoon. And then we see a resurgence, usually sort of mid to late summer. And now, if we break this down by cause, I find this interesting. We're seeing a lot of human caused fires in May, in the spring in general. And I believe this is because, folks like to, we're often, the fire season sneaks up on us. So maybe we're clearing land or we're burning some piles and things like that. And it's like, oh, the snow just melted. We should be good. And I think this is where a lot of fires are getting away on us. It's that that complacency of spring. Oh, it's early spring, and they'll sneak up on you, especially in the Hudson's Hope environment. We're on that south-facing aspect that dries out quite quickly, and you can get snow-free quite quickly, and it doesn't take long for the cured grass to dry out and to be able to carry a fire. So we're getting human-caused fires lots in the spring, and then we're getting our lightning-caused fires in the summer. That's when we get our lightning. I'll touch on how the province assesses the wildfire threat and risk. So they have a geographic information system, a GIS model that they run for the entire province for provincial crown land. And what it does is it takes forest inventory data, so it's called the vegetation resource inventory, and then it extrapolates from that fuel type, and then it looks at the wildfire history, and it combines that information to establish a threat for each for the forest surrounding the community. And so what we see here is the threat they've associated with the forest around Hudson's Hope. We see extreme threat is shown in red, high threat is orange, moderate threat is yellow, and low threat is green. So according to this GIS model, um, we have mostly moderate threat around Hudson's Hope. We do have some extreme threat here around Portage Mountain and the Peace Canyon, keeping in mind that prevailing winds are westerly, so getting a fire coming through this area here, you're going to have some extreme threat fuel types burning here. Um, Something to keep in mind. Now, um, the province has also developed this framework, the WUI risk class maps. And basically what that is it's looking at the threat from the provincial strategic threat analysis within, I believe it's a 2.75, basically within a range close to communities. And so they're saying, okay, with this level of threat within this area, close to community, we'll assign it with a risk classification. So, according to this framework, you have Barrow Prairie has a risk class of 1, which is the highest risk, and you have Hudson's Hope with a risk class of 2. The scale is 1 to 5, with 1 being the highest risk and 5 being the lowest risk. So to sum up what we're deriving from this provincial modeling and framework is that um, we do have some high threat fuel types out there. It's mostly moderate threat. And then the province is assigning Barrow Prairie, and Hudson's Hope with the highest and second highest threat wildfire threat classification. They use this classification when they prioritize funding and things like that. So basically, the province needed a way to assess wildfire threat across the province in a systematic way so that they could prioritize things like interventions and funding and things like that. Um, so it's good to know. It's also not, you can imagine if this information is being done at the provincial level, it doesn't have the same um, level of detail or accuracy that we want to use at our local level. And that is why we do our own wildfire threat assessments. So we did our own wildfire threat assessments, and we focused on municipal land because the province has done their own assessments on provincial crown land, and we're not focusing on private land as that's essentially the other components of the Fire Smart program are focusing on the private land. We're working with landowners and homeowners to mitigate the risk on private land. So just looking at municipal land, we did 7 wildfire threat assessments. Here, the municipal land in this map is shown in blue, and the location of our threat assessments is shown with the red dots. Um, so from these assessments, we found that most of the plots have low, well, most have a low threat. And as I mentioned earlier with the fuel types, this is because we have primarily low threat fuel types. The previous fuel mitigation work that was done, or fuel treatment work that was done, also helped to reduce the threat in a lot of these areas. So looking at our wildfire threat assessment WTA plots, 1 to 5 have a low fuel threat rating. Uh, 6 has a moderate fuel threat rating, but when you look at where 6 is, it's quite far from values at risk. And then plot 7 has an extreme threat rating. This is the C2, the boreal spruce fuel type. And so we have an extreme wildfire threat at plot 7, which is beside the Barrow Prairie Fire Hall. That's municipal land. And and so we first got the fuel threat ratings, and then there's a process that we went through, which is according to provincial guidelines. We combine this threat with we're considering how close is this threat to our values, what is the spread pattern, so the prevailing wind direction, how is that, the relationship between this fuel type and our values, and given the prevailing winds. And then we also looked at topography because topography impacts how fires move. So and then combining all that information, we were able to get a risk rating for each WTA, and each WTA is representing a potential forest treatment unit. So what were the results? So keeping it broad, we do have extreme threat and extreme risk at Barrel Prairie, and that's a clear priority for fuel treatment. Whereas the other stands were either low threat or low risk, and so there's no treatment recommended at the other potential forest treatment units. But Barrel Prairie is a clear priority. And next we look at vulnerability. So what makes structures vulnerable to ignition or susceptible to ignition? So we look at our structures and look for ignition hazards. And we do this with the FireSmart Critical Infrastructure Assessment for district infrastructure. And for private homes, we use something called the FireSmart Home Ignition Zone Assessment. So if you live in Hudson's Hope, you can contact your FireSmart coordinator, Jerry Bird, and get a FireSmart Home Ignition Zone Assessment. And essentially, it's a way to find out if your home is vulnerable or susceptible impact from a wildfire. And so if you look at this diagram here, you can see there's an example of unmitigated property. So there's lots of fuel around and ignition hazards on the home. And so this home is vulnerable to wildfire, whereas the home below, which is mitigated, is resilient to wildfire. So again, for private homeowners, you want to reach out to your Fire Smart coordinator and get a home ignition zone assessment. And for the district, we have done these assessments for critical infrastructure and basically developed a plan to address any identified vulnerabilities. So to summarize the wildfire risk assessment, so most frequently wildfires in the Hudson Soap area are human caused. They occur in spring, and they're usually low intensity surface or grass fires. Now you do get lightning caused fires. They're typically midsummer, and they can have a large impact on the landscape as well. There is still the potential for another large wildfire like we saw in 2014 and 2022. So we do need to prepare and be ready for that. You do have some higher threat fuel types on the landscape, but in general, you have lower threat fuel types, which is a good thing. The community is somewhat or has some protection thanks to its low slope position near the Site C reservoir. And the other reservoirs also kind of act as natural fuel breaks, which is nice. Um, when we look at the community values, and it's up to each homeowner to look at their home, but when we look at critical infrastructure, it is currently vulnerable to the effects of wildfire. And so we've worked into our plan a plan to mitigate those vulnerabilities. So next up, we have the mitigation strategy. Now, one option is to put up signs like this. Um, but in all seriousness, we have come up with a strategy that is utilizing the 7 Fire Smart disciplines. So, we tie our strategy to it's basically a phased progression that makes sense. And my first question to kind of launch us into our strategy is, can we fight fire with ice cream? And interesting enough, I found this article online that says ice cream fire extinguisher, a novel approach to blaze suppression or just a sweet dream. So let me know, what do you think? Can we fight fire with ice cream? Is it a novel approach or is it just a sweet dream? Yes, you can fight fire with ice cream, and I will explain when I get to our education strategy. But just to go over the broad mitigation strategy, we're going to roll it out in 4 phases. I should mention that this strategy is subject to funding from the provincial government through the CRI program. If that funding isn't available, obviously the strategy will need to be changed and basically prioritized to what can be done. But this strategy I'm presenting today is taking into account the resources that are hopefully available through the provincial government CRI program. So we have 4 broad phases. We're going to start with education and awareness. And this is where the ice cream comes in. If you give people ice cream, they'll come and talk to you, and they'll learn about wildfire mitigation. So yes, you can fight fire with ice cream. It's a hearts and mind campaign, and ice cream. Everybody loves ice cream. The second phase is taking action. So we want to work with community members so that so they have the support they need to take action on their property. And then once we've got everybody working on their properties, we're going to be working on district infrastructure. So extending mitigations to district sites, so your critical infrastructure, your vegetation management. And then the final phase, which this program is quite early on, so we're not doing a lot in this final phase because we're not there yet. But that's looking at long-term policies and development strategies and things like that. But first and foremost, it's a hearts and mind campaign, and then we're going to get to work. Um, Helping individual homeowners, and then doing all the work that the district for the district sites. So the first phase, as I mentioned, is the engagement phase, and it's all about raising awareness and education. And so we're in this phase now. We have Jerry Bird, our Fire Smart coordinator, and we've got lots of events. We have the Fire Smart booth at other community events. We have informational, promotional materials that is being distributed at these events. And we have website, social media. We have home ignition zone assessments. It's a great way for homeowners to understand the risk to their property. And we have staff training for the District of Hudson's Hope staff and volunteers so that they are ready to work alongside BC Wildfire Service during the next wildfire event. The next phase, the initiative phase, is all about taking action and really supporting residents as they take the initiative to do work on their own property. And so in this phase, we hope to offer mitigation supports for seniors, people with limited mobility and vulnerable populations. And what that looks like is all of these supports generally start with a Fire Smart home ignition zone assessment. And then from there, the Fire Smart coordinator will establish the eligibility of a person to receive supports, and that these supports actually make sense in this case. And then we'll work with local contractors through a competitive process so that we can deliver these supports to eligible residents. Rebate program is a way for is another support that we hope to offer where residents completing Fire Smart mitigation work as outlined in their home ignition zone assessment can get a rebate, a 50% rebate up to $1,000. Now, again, this is subject to funding, but it's just another tool to help motivate homeowners to take action on their property. Another program we're looking to offer is a curbside chipping program so that residents can do a cleanup on their property, pile their vegetative waste in an accessible location, and then again through a competitive process with a local contractor offer a service of free chipping of flammable vegetation and things like that to reduce the risk to the neighborhood. The next phase is the expansion phase, where we'll be extending mitigation work to district sites. And this includes critical infrastructure. On the right, we have the example of the Hudson's Hope Fire Department radio repeater. And you can see it before and after mitigation. This mitigation work was done with the PRD Fire Smart program last year. And just as an example of the type of work that will be done at critical infrastructure sites. We also have green space mitigations where any green space like a vacant lot or any sort of park areas that are owned by the district, we're going to assess those areas and then mitigate the wildfire risk to those spaces accordingly. And then for fuel management, doing fuel management, first prescription by a professional forester, and then actual mitigation work. So basically fuel management mitigation, it could be thinning the forest out, could be strip or patch cuts, encouraging or conversion, some kind of conversion to more deciduous species, for example. These are all examples. The actual treatment will be established with a prescription from a professional forester. And this will likely be a few years down the road. But yeah, this site is de a definite priority um, for the district. And the last phase is the integration phase. Hudson's Hope already has a strong base of fire smart type of legislation, and so at this stage, we're not recommending any further legislation. This is really something that would be looked at farther down the road. And so any sort of integration type activities will be reconsidered in 5 years once the CWRP is set for renewal. At this stage, again, focusing on education, if somebody applies for a development permit, they'll be given the Fire Smart Residential Development Guide, just as an education piece, so that folks can act in their best interest for wildfire resiliency. So that pretty much wraps it up. The detailed plan will be available on the Hudson's Hope website with links on social media. So I'd love to get your feedback. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email me at mitch@mammothforestry.ca, or you can give me a call at 250-321-9224. Please provide your feedback by mid-February, February 16th, so that I can integrate that into the plan and wrap things up. So just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to you for watching this video. I can't believe you made it through. Just kidding. It can be a bit dry and try to make it as interesting as possible. But when you're going through a process, yeah, it is what it is. So thank you for getting through this. Thanks to the mayor and council for seeing the importance of wildfire resiliency and supporting this program. Thanks to Chief Fred Burrows and the Chief Administrative Officer, Crystal Brown, for really getting this program going. And a big thanks to Jerry Bird, the Fire Smart Coordinator. Jerry's doing a great job, and really her enthusiasm for the program is contagious. So thanks, Jerry. Thanks, everyone. Hope to hear from you, and all the best.